Hey Jeff,
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you too. Sorry about the strange lighting. It gets very dark in this room. I know there's folks on the on the webinar right now, so we just want to give others just a couple minutes to join us. And just as a reminder, you can use there's no chat function that's available, but there is a Q&A. So the chat function is just for the hosts and for us that are on this speaking panel. And then if you have any questions during the webinar, you can go ahead and certainly put it into the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we get those answered for you as soon as possible.
Okay, that's perfect.
Yeah, so just a couple of things to remind the attendees. There is going to be a follow-up email sent to you after this webinar so that you can fill out a survey. You can give us your name and address. And if you're living within the US, you can get a free copy of the book. So we're really excited. And I have evidence of the book. I can show you the boxes that are in my house, but I have this. We're super excited. It's called Ask, and we're super I cannot wait for this conversation, but we just want to give one more minute and go from there. But
Totally, that makes sense. Yeah, I can imagine giving people a couple more minutes even. And we're not going to see them, is that right?
that's correct. Yeah,
We'll
we're
only
on
see
a
them
web.
by questions that they put into the Q&A.
Yeah, I know a few folks in the audience because there are some of our friends from past webinars and just
Oh,
work
cool.
on in the past, so that's great. And the session's being recorded, and so we'll have that available as well.
Love it.
And so I have a little secret to share with everyone. If you haven't done it already, if you got curious at all and you're joining us and you signed up for this webinar, Jeff, whom I will introduce in just a moment, has set up a very cool website with resources. And I took my assessment. So we'll talk about that in a second, but I was a little bit embarrassed because I had to share it with Jeff. I'm like, oh boy, I got some work to
I
do.
loved it. I thought you did great.
So I think we'll get started with the conversation. It is a Tuesday night. It's 8 o'clock on the East Coast. If you are joining us from the West, it's 5. So hopefully you'll be maybe having a glass of wine while you're watching in between before dinner. For those of you who've already had dinner and you're joining us, we're going to try and keep the conversation pretty tight and really just enjoyable. It's a sort of a post-dinner conversation. And then I know we're competing against a lot of other shows tonight as well on a Tuesday in May, as well as probably graduation season, prom season, and all the other things that are happening. So my name is Chi Kim. I'm the CEO of Pure Edge, and I am so excited that you joined us this evening. And one of my main, I think, reasons why is I get to have a conversation with my friend Jeff, who actually a few years ago, Jeff and I had a conversation, and he was asking me some questions about my background when he was starting this. It's really cool organization. And I think from the course of that and just talking to Jeff, he changed my life, and I want everyone to know that. He had recommended me for a program that I has just been life changing for me. So I'm just gonna full disclosure on that. I just am very grateful for him, and I think you're in for a really special treat, and you get a gift along the way as well. Emily Irving is here as well, just so you know, she's here and she will be answering any questions that you might have, and just standing by for that. Our goal is to have a conversation that's going to end probably around 8:35, 8:40, unless you have lots of questions. We wanted to keep it light touch. We wanted to introduce you to Jeff, give you a little bit of background, and then also to talk a little bit about his book and why I think it's going to be one of the most impactful books that you could possibly have on your shelf as if you're a leader or a teacher, a parent. It just makes you think very differently. And so that's what I wanted to just introduce him in that way. So without further ado, Jeff Wetzler, welcome to Pure Edge and our webinar. I'd love for you to just share a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind, just your background.
Yeah,
I know.
thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be with you, Chi. And that was just such a kind introduction. So I'm very grateful. My name is Jeff Wetzler. I live in the New York area. I am a father. I have two teenagers. I have a high school senior and a high school sophomore. I'm also co-founder and co-CEO of Transcend, which Chi alluded to. Transcend is a nonprofit organization that works with school communities across the United States who are looking to innovate and reimagine what school can be. And so we get the privilege of working with some of the most visionary education and education leaders across the country. And then most recently, I'm also the author of Ask, this book called Tap into the Hidden Wisdom of People Around You, which she is holding up, and excited to talk about that tonight.
I feel like my big dream was to be like Vanna White, right? I'm just going to hold up the book. um, the fun part about doing this on webinars, Jeff, I think, is just getting a little bit of insight. It's always fun to be able to invite authors and folks onto these webinars. I know it's also people don't want to be on Zoom anymore, but there's opportunities right now, I think, that, just opening up the world in a different way.
Yes.
I would love for you to just share a little bit about, you've done so much in your background, and you share that in your book as well, just about why, how and why this book came about. Um,
Yeah.
I would love for you to just share a little bit about, what made you write a book? I know you've been doing a lot of work in education. You've been in so many different organizations and supporting and leading, but why this one?
Yeah. So some of it has to do with the problem that the book is trying to address, and we'll get into this more. But basically, the problem that the book is tackling, which in a nutshell is that there's so much we could be learning from the people around us that we often don't find out. And we'll talk more about that. But it's a pervasive problem. It's a problem that I have faced, and in some ways, continue to face in my leadership. I see lots of other people face it, and it's painful. The consequences of not actually tapping into all that insight that's around us, all that collective genius, takes a toll on our decisions, on our relationships, on time that we waste, and so much more. And I've paid those costs, and I've watched other people pay those costs. So it felt like there's a need. But just as importantly, I have been very fortunate in my life and in my career to have a set of teachers and mentors who have given me a set of tools and ideas for how to overcome this problem. And it has made a huge difference for me in my own leadership. It's really been the foundation of my leadership, trying to learn from other people. But it's also the foundation of how I coach and support the people around me as well. And I have seen it make an enormous difference, not just for myself, but for them. And so a couple of years ago, I felt like it's time to pay it forward. I really wanted to be able to bring these different ideas together, each of which is powerful, but I think in combination is almost a superpower. And I wanted to offer it to other people as well, because I wanted people to benefit from what I've been so fortunate to receive.
And I know there's scenarios in the book that I just find fascinating, because you can go through, I could be a business leader, I could be a classroom teacher, I could be a school leader. I think that the book and the actual protocols that you put into place, if I can call them protocols,
Sure.
are really, they're sort of universal. I know we talked a lot about, who's going to be in the audience at Pure Edge. And to be honest, I think when we originally started, they were teachers, pre-K through 12. And then as we started to grow in terms of our webinars and just sort of our reach, we've had folks from nonprofits, businesses, professors from colleges, including all of our K-12 friends, and wanting to know a little bit about, who did you write the book for? Was it intended to be a business book? Was it intended to be an education book? I would love to just know a little bit about that, and then we can kind of dig into the 5 aspects.
Yeah. I mean, as you said, I think any one of us who has any kind of relationships or interactions, whether that's with our students, our bosses, our customers, our clients, our friends, our family, we all face the problem in any dimension of our life. I did gear the book more towards people in organizations, as opposed to just in the rest of our life. But even though it applies to the rest of our life, and from my perspective, every person in an organization, or even every person in our society, has the opportunity to exert leadership. And so I view this as a book for leaders, but not just leaders who are in positions of formal authority, but leaders who are exerting leadership from any corner of an organization.
You know, I read the book, so I travel quite a bit. I know probably not as much as you, but I was reading the book on the plane, and there's a couple of things that are, really, it stuck with me in a way that it was taking me back to when I was a school principal.
Ah,
When you bring new initiatives into place, right? That's just sort of the way that schools run. You bring it in, and you just know that there's going to be people that just say, I don't want to do that. We've been there, done that. and kind of just wait it out to see if maybe I might leave as a leader. But the question I know that always came up for me, this is what made me think of it, is how can I get you to yes? Right? What would it take for me to just, what are the barriers? Like, how can I get you to yes? And when I was reading your book, it made me think of all the different scenarios that came up, of just why, what kinds of questions, why are people afraid? And it kind of leads me to this, like, what kinds of information are people most likely to withhold from you, and why? You do a ton of research, and I think just from personal experience, but what kinds of information do people hold back that kind
Yeah.
of leads,
So
like I don't want to do this.
totally. So I spent a bunch of time both sifting through my own experiences with people, but also looking into the social science research as well. And there were a few big patterns of things that people don't tell us. You could think about this almost like the thought bubbles in the back of their head that they're thinking and feeling but not saying. One of the big things that often stays stuck in people's thought bubbles that they don't tell us is the struggles and challenges that they're up against, the things that they're dealing with. Maybe to your point, she like maybe the initiative that we would love them to embrace actually would somehow make worse what they're already struggling with, or maybe the thing that they're struggling with makes them feel like I wouldn't be able to do the thing to do what they're asking me to do, whatever it may be. People often don't tell us their struggles, and I saw this myself as an operating leader when I was trying to lead my team through some big events that we were trying to put together, and there were some really big issues going on. And every time I would talk to my team, it was sort of like, yeah, there's a couple bumps, but we got it. And I didn't really learn what were some of the deepest struggles, and we can talk about why later. But that's one. That's one. A second thing that people sometimes don't tell us is what they really think about a topic or an issue, especially if it's controversial, especially if they think that we're really excited about it. And if they have concerns about it, they may not tell us those concerns. Or if they tell us those concerns, they may not tell us the full extent of their concerns or where their concerns are coming from. So that's the second thing. A third thing that people often don't tell us is feedback they have for us. So I literally had a call earlier today with a colleague of mine who gave me some critical feedback. And she said to me at the end, she said, Jeff, this was not easy for me to tell you. And I so appreciated that she told me. And it didn't even occur to me why this would be difficult for her to tell me. But in the end, of course, I understood. But oftentimes people don't give us that feedback. And so we don't find that out. And then the last one that I think is really interesting that people often don't tell us is they're like their wildest, most crazy ideas, like the thing that they know that might actually make our idea better. Or maybe it's the thing that's even better than the idea that we put forward, but they don't say it. Maybe they think it's too crazy. Maybe they think that we don't want to hear it or we're too attached to our own idea. So when I look at all those different things, I kind of think that that's almost like a treasure trove. That's like a gold mine of insight, ideas, wisdom, collective genius that we're surrounded by that far too often we don't hear. You also asked why don't they tell us, but let me just pause and see if there's anything you want to react to in what I've said so far.
Well, I'm just thinking of, I'm going to put just in the school space,
Yeah,
if having been a teacher, a principal, a superintendent, and then sort of going through and facilitating conversations in these school districts, I often wonder how often folks have sat in meetings where they were supposed to go through a quote unquote process, but the leader already knew the outcome they wanted, right?
right.
And so I think we're almost conditioned not to really want to share, because in the end, have we been in systems that allow us to share and actually make, a meaningful difference? Or are we in institutions and places where, and organizations where they say they want to hear from you, but in the end, they're going to do exactly what they've already planned to do.
Right,
Right. So
right.
I just don't, part of me wonders if the conditioning that we've all had, just in terms of, places and spaces that we've been in, if that's part of the reason.
Yeah. In one of the past places that I work, people call that fake investment. Like I'm here to invest you, but I don't really care what you really think because we're going to do it anyways. And I think to your point, when people are on the receiving end of that and they think this is fake investment, they're not going to say what they really think. Why would they waste their breath? And so that's, to the question of why don't people tell us what they really think? One of the biggest reasons is they don't think we really care.
Yeah.
They think we're going to do whatever we want to do no matter what,
Right.
or we're not that interested in what they have to say. So that's one of the reasons. And then relatedly, why waste my time? It takes time to share my views, and there's an emotional cost to sharing my views. And maybe it will have, maybe it'll have an impact on our relationship. Maybe it'll put tension in our relationship. Maybe it'll expose something about me. There's all these different kinds of risks that people go through. But sometimes people don't tell us what they really think just because they don't have the words to say it. Like maybe it's a gut intuition, or maybe the words that do occur to them are so toxic they know that it would make things worse if they said it, but they can't think of a constructive way to say it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's none of that, and it's just a math problem. And what I mean by that is that I learned in doing the research for the book, the human mind can think at 900 words per minute, but the human mouth can only get out 125 words per minute. So if I'm talking to someone, I'm actually hearing less than 15% of what they're thinking at any given minute, if only because the math just doesn't work. The mouth cannot express all the things that someone's thinking in any given moment in time, and so they don't have the words to say it.
Well, and then I'm just thinking that just made me think about all the ways in which we have to practice intentional listening, right?
That's
Because
right.
we're trying to get the next idea out or the next try to
Yeah, when we've got that 900 words stuck in our head and we can only get out, we're like, how do I get the rest of it out? I got to get more through this really narrow straw. But we really should be also taking in what's coming back at us too.
Yeah, I mean, you would just make a really good point about just what's processing, right? And then the context in which we're sitting in that process, and then what levels of really kind of engagement and investment we have in whatever the outcome that we're seeking. I would love to just take the time now because I know this is sort of a light touch conversation for us, and I'd love for you to just go through a little bit of the five, the 5 ways. I feel like the 5 steps of the ask method is going to be super important. I think that would be a big takeaway for everyone,
Absolutely.
and then we can just sort of have a little bit of a conversation. If, in fact, anyone in the of the attendees, if you have a question while this comes up, please feel free to just put it into the Q&A. You will get a free copy of the book if you are in the US, so just know that, and we will ship it out within the week. So I'm going to let you take it away with the 5 steps, Jeff.
Good. Yes, please. We love questions. I mean, that's the whole point. And the I'll just say the ask approach is my attempt to deal with this problem that we've been talking about, to deal with the problem that we cannot really know for sure what the people around us are thinking and feeling. And what's interesting is it wouldn't be a problem if we could read their minds. If we could actually guess accurately what the people around us are thinking and feeling, we wouldn't need the ask approach. But there's so much interesting research that shows we are so bad at guessing. Even some of the most conventional wisdom of how to read other people's minds, like try to read their body language. Research shows like that actually doesn't work very well. Try to put yourself in their shoes. That doesn't work very well. Even like trained TSA agents at the airport score really badly at knowing what's really going on for someone. So it turns out the research shows there is only one proven method that reliably allows us to know what the people around us are actually thinking and feeling, which is to ask them. And so that's what the ask approach is all about. And so it's 5 practices. All of them are grounded in research. All of them are tested in action. And when we put them together, they give us the greatest chance of really finding out what the people around us think, feel, and know, so that we can be better off together, so that we can make better decisions together, so that we can save time together, innovate together, be closer together, all of it. So the first one is called choose curiosity. And it has to start with curiosity. If we're not curious and we're just trying to implement this as a technique, people will see through it. But conversely, if we are curious, when we are curious, people will sense that energy. And that even that intention will cultivate in other people a desire to share. And what does it mean to choose curiosity? So I'm not looking at curiosity as like a trait that some people have and other people don't have. I'm not looking at it as a state of mind, like I'm feeling curious today, but I'm not feeling curious, another day. I'm looking at curiosity as a choice, meaning that it's a decision that is always available to us. And when we decide that we want to choose curiosity, it means centering one question in our minds. And that question is, what can I learn from this person in front of me or these people in front of me? And when I center that question, what can I learn from this person? It pushes away all other questions. It pushes away questions like, how do I look smart? How do I get them to do what I want? How do I prove that I'm right? How do I get out of here? All these other questions that can shut down our curiosity. But when we really center that question, what can I learn from this person? It puts us in a much more curious state of mind. And then inside of that question, all kinds of other questions start to come up. Questions like, what do they know that I don't know? What might they be seeing? What might I be overlooking? How might I be impacting them? What's their lived experience? All these kinds of questions start to come out of that. And so we could talk more about curiosity, but at its essence, that's number one, choose curiosity.
I just want to interject for a second, Jeff, because where I think I have that the most is when I get into an Uber. I
Yes.
don't know why. I don't like to talk on planes, but when I get into an Uber I talk to the driver everywhere I
Yeah.
go. I'm just so curious, and
I
I've learned so much in Ubers.
It's so I totally agree. At the end of the book, I actually tell a story about an Uber driver who had very different political views than me, and I was able to have a long conversation with him because we were stuck in traffic, and I learned so much. And by the end of the conversation, I didn't share his political views, but I found so much common ground with him, and I had so much respect and appreciation for him. So when we have these opportunities to really lean into curiosity, there is so much to learn, I believe, from every single person about their human experience.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so
So
curiosity.
that's number one, curiosity. Now, number two is called make it safe. And what this is really about is that even if I'm curious about you, if you don't feel safe to tell me your truth, especially if it's a hard truth, I'm not going to learn from you. And to Anna's point, I might get the silent treatment from you. I might, and that silent treatment might be partly because the person doesn't feel safe actually sharing with you. And so making it safe is about lowering the barriers. It's about making it more comfortable, more easier, and even more appealing for people to share with you. And in this part of the book, I talk about a couple of strategies for how to do that. One is about creating connection with the other person, not just the kind of connection that's like we know each other better, we trust each other more. That is really important as a baseline, but even connection about like the place and space and time of where we're connecting. And in my research for the book, I interviewed a number of iconic CEOs, and CEOs are notorious for not getting the truth. I know this myself as a CEO, and people want to tell the CEO what they think the CEO wants to hear. So I said to these CEOs, how did you make it more comfortable for people to tell you the truth? And they said things like, well, if I wanted to learn the truth from someone, especially someone multiple layers away from me in the organization, the last thing I would do would be to invite them into my office, have them sit across the big CEO desk from me, and expect that they're going to feel comfortable telling me the truth. No, that's intimidating. I'm going to go to them. We're going to have lunch. We're going to take a walk. We're going to do a sales call together, whatever it is. I need to go to where they're going to be most comfortable. And I will say I experienced this in my personal life too. Like my teenage daughter, when she gets home from school or when we have dinner and I want to know what's going on in her world, and I ask her, I get the silent treatment to use Anna's comment or question in the chat. But if I do it when she wants to talk, which in her case is 11 p.m. at night, when she's done with her homework, when she's done talking to her friends, I'm exhausted, but it all comes out. She doesn't want me to leave. And so, some of that is making it safer. It's like, where is she going to feel most comfortable having the conversation? Making it safe also means us opening up first. So it's not just about interrogating the other person with questions, but letting them know why we're asking the questions, what our agenda is, what our uncertainties are, what our point of view is as well, so that we can invite that kind of reciprocal sharing on their part. And it also includes things what I did in the book that I call radiating resilience, letting them know that we can handle their truth. So all of that is what is number two, make it safe. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that it reminds me of being a school administrator. You know, when someone gets sent to the office, the last thing you ever want to do is actually interrogate a kid in your office. I mean, at least for elementary. So
Yes,
we would do the walk and talks. So we would go out, we would walk and talk, just get them, de-escalated and walking. And honestly, I think like that's one of the best strategies because you are keeping it in a safe place where it's not, in the office across the desk and all those. But
I totally agree. I totally agree. I love that example.
all right, number three.
Number three is called pose quality questions. And this is really the heart of the ask approach, which is what are the questions that we ask? I define a quality question very simply as a question that enables us to learn something important from the other person. And it's amazing how many things have question marks that don't actually really allow us to learn things. That I call those crummy questions. Crummy questions could be anything like a clumsy question, like something that we actually do want to learn, but we phrase it in such a way that it doesn't seem easy for the other person to answer. My favorite clumsy question is when someone will say something and then they'll end it by saying, right? Or am I right? Or and they might even really want to know what you think. But that's a very difficult question for someone to answer, honestly. Of course, there's sneaky questions that allow, where you're trying to maneuver someone, like a lawyer would sort of like lead a witness to an answer. There's attack questions. There's all kinds of crummy questions out there. But quality questions, on the other hand, are kind of what I imagine how a surgeon might think about all their scalpel and all their other tools. Like depending on what you're trying to do, there's a particular question that you can use. And most of us have never been trained in what the repertoire of quality questions are. And so our repertoire is pretty narrow. We might have like our favorite go-to question, like help me understand or this and that, but there's actually just a whole range of questions. I'll just give you one example. One question strategy that is commonly overlooked is what I call request reactions. And that's just simply to say to the other person, whatever I think, or here's my idea, or my feedback, or my whatever request, and then to say, what's your reaction to that? What does that make you think? How does that land with you? How does that sit with you? How does that strike you? What might I be overlooking? Those are all examples of the kinds of questions that can invite other people's reactions. And I think we can sometimes assume if they have a reaction, they're going to tell us. But very often they're not going to tell us unless they actually know that we want to know their reaction and we've posed a question that makes room for the whole range of reactions that they have. So that's just one of many of the different categories of quality questions that I talk about.
All right, so you've got curiosity.
Choose curiosity, make it safe, pose
Makes it.
quality questions.
All
Then
right.
what comes next is what you raised this earlier. It's listening. It's how do we actually listen to what we hear from people? And so this practice is called listen to learn. And listening to learn is different than listening to prove a point or listening to be right. Or most of us are far worse. The research shows we think we're good at listening, but we're not very good at it. And there's a huge difference between thinking we're listening versus actually hearing what the other person has to say.
Mm.
And so um, I have always kind of gravitated towards listening through what I call one channel of what someone's saying, which is the content of what they're saying, which is the information, the facts, the figures, the claims, the logic, all of that kind of stuff. And I've come to learn over time that there are two other channels that are equally important to be listening through. One of them is the emotion. So is someone feeling frustrated? Are they feeling hurt? Are they feeling angry? Are they feeling happy? Are they all those kinds of things? Sometimes that's actually more important than the content channel. And then the other channel is the channel of action. What are they actually doing? Are they agreeing to things? Are they making a commitment? Are they pushing back? Are they raising questions? Are they raising objections? Are they offering support? Any number of those things are actually actions that people take. And so if we can start to listen through those three channels, content, emotion, action, we could literally triple the amount of information that we're hearing from other people. And just the same way that I think a musician could, really good music aficionado could listen to the vocals and to the percussion and to the harmony, each one by one, but then put it together and just have so much richer of a sense of what's going on. We can do the same with listening. So in this part of the book, we talk about a lot of different strategies for how you can actually listen in that way.
That actually reminds me, with the way you were laying that out, I'm thinking of I'm always going to put back this into a school
Yeah.
context. Makes me think of all the strategic planning processes I've gone through over the years with all the post-its and all the content. But once you start to distill down exactly the different pieces, I actually feel like your process would be much more efficient in a strategy.
Wow.
Going through some other things, but that's a different conversation. But it really makes me think about how you ask the question when you're in a group and you really want good feedback. You actually could ask them in those specific ways, right?
Yes, that's true. I love that.
Okay, so number 5.
And then so number 5 is my favorite because I'm like a nerd and junkie for learning. And number 5 is all about learning. It's basically how do you take everything that you've just asked and heard and actually convert it into insight and convert that insight into action. So the practice is called reflect and reconnect. And I think a lot of people think reflection is this really mysterious thing. It's hard to do. I have to go on a meditation retreat to figure out how to reflect. But I try to break it down and talk about how reflection can be a very practical, structured, simple process we can go through. I call it sift it and turn it. And the sift it is just simply to say, of all the things I heard from someone, maybe I heard 15 things from somebody in this conversation, what really matters and what can I release? Because not all the feedback we get from someone we need to take in, and not all the things that people share with us are equally important. And so sifting it is really trying to sift out what we don't need to take in and then really focus on what we do need to take in. That can be done by just looking back at our notes, journaling, looking at a transcript, or listening to the video again. And also I often encourage people to, ask a friend or a colleague to help you sift it so that you're not accidentally sifting out things that are really important. And then once you've sifted it and you've got the good stuff, then turn it. And turn it is just turning it over in your mind. And I say there's 3 turns to make when we reflect. One turn is what is to basically say, how does what I heard affect my story? about what's going on here, my story about the other person, my story about myself, my story about what I'm trying to do. The second turn is what steps should I take based on what how it's affected my story. And the third is there anything in my deeper stuff that I should look at here? Is there something that this reveals about my ways of being or my biases or my deeper assumptions? And so story, steps, and stuff are the three reflective turns in the sift it and turn it process. And then I call it reflect and reconnect because the reconnect means this is not about just for ourselves. This is not getting insight and walking away as in an extractive way. This is about reconnecting with the other person and saying to them, thank you for sharing that. That might not have been easy. And if you took a risk, I appreciate it. And here's what I learned from you. And here's what I'm going to do about it. And I think it's very rare that we make that move. But when someone's on the receiving end of that, it can send them such a message that they didn't waste their time, that you really value them. It gives them a chance to correct your takeaways if you've had wrong lessons. And I think it really increases the closeness of the relationship and makes it much more likely that sharing is going to happen over time. So that's number 5: reflect and reconnect.
So I had to laugh, Jeff, because when I was reading this, I'm like, this is really good for just one-on-one relationships, right? And then when I went to your website and I had seen all of the other book recommendations, it made me think like, yes, because whether you're a leader in an organization, a school, or a business, or even just working in a team, having those skill sets just as a human being for human connection, I think that's why I love the book so much. It's just really about how to figure out how to connect with other human beings first, and then
Yes.
you can unpack the layers of that. I just find that there are going to be so many other scenarios that you can use the ask method, and I think I hope that the folks that are joining us will find some other applications as well. But I wanted to ask you a couple things about the book. Um, how long did it take you to write this? Because I know that it took a lot of research, and you have applications, and you've got your website and all those things. I'm curious, honestly, to know how long it took you to actually gather and write.
So it depends on when you start counting. I've been thinking about this for like the last 20 years. And I still remember 20 years ago when I was underwater at the gym, swimming in the pool, and like I had this idea for a book that was called like The Unspoken. So it's been rattling around for a long time. But the serious effort started about 3 years ago. And you can see the box of Emily Irving, who's on here as well, who has been my partner and collaborator right from the very beginning. And she played a pivotal role in the research of the book and the writing and all of that stuff. So we've been at it for about the last, the research and the writing was about 2 years, and then the editing and launch preparation was the final year.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to go ahead and go into the Q&A box, Jeff, just because I feel like there's some comments. I know Anna has been, you know, like our power comments here, but I
Thank
wanted
you, Anna.
I think that there was a question from Sarah that I wanted to share with you. How do you manage the energy mindset in the room to create space for working the approach? Like, for example, a meeting would benefit from the approach to get more ideas on the table or understand everyone's whys. But others in the room are not focused on getting to the end or getting to their answer as quickly as possible.
Yeah. One of my mentors, Diana Smith, has a phrase that she says, pay now or pay later. So are you going to take the time now to do it, or are you going to waste the time later that you didn't find by finding out what's going on for people? I think the answer is partly has to do with what is your position in the meeting. If you're the person running or the facilitating the meeting, or you have the power to influence or shape the agenda, then I think it is important to be creating some space in the agenda for people to say to really hear from each person. If you don't have that possibility to do it, and you're a participant in the meeting who cannot shape the agenda, it can be a little bit more challenging, but it is also an opportunity to basically say, I think we haven't heard from everybody. Or can we slow this down a little bit? One of my favorite ways to slow down the energy in a conversation, is when people are going back and forth in a heated way. If you just say to the other person, before we go on, I want to check if I understood what you had to say. Can I just play it back to you? And can you let me know if I got it or if you would modify anything? That move, and I think anybody can do that move, whether you're running the meeting or you're the facilitator of the meeting, has this magic effect of just slowing everything down. It causes people to take a deep breath. It sends the message to people, I care to understand what you have to say. And a lot of times, if you play it back and you haven't gotten it right, it lets them know, oh, we got to slow this thing down. So those are a couple quick thoughts, but I really appreciate the question, because these pressures for speed and urgency in the book, I call that a curiosity killer. And so we do need to kind of make a little bit more spaciousness and slow things down to be able to learn from each other.
What's interesting, because I think all the protocols that you have in the book and just this different scenarios, it's sort of the antithesis of what social media does, right? So
That's right.
everything is speeded up and sort of accelerated. I'm actually wanting to find out from you. I know you've been doing a lot of podcasts and a lot of sort of book talks and things. What's the most sort of insightful thing that you've received from an audience member? I know you write for the audience and for folks to get nuggets of wisdom, but have you had any sort of feedback for you from the book that you just went like, wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that could be possible.
Yeah. Well, so I've gotten lots of questions, some of which I deal with in the book, some of which I have thoughts about. But I do remember getting one question that I felt unsatisfied with my own answer to,
Mm,
which I think it means that Emily and I have discussed this might mean that it's a kernel for the next book.
mm,
But the question is like, what happens when you ask a question genuinely and earnestly to somebody else, and what you get back is incredibly hard for you to sit with?
mm,
When it's difficult to actually sift it out, and it really maybe cuts to your emotional core. And I feel like there are some things we say in the book about this in terms of where to apply
yeah.
this and how to sift, but there's a lot more, I think, to explore about what does it mean to take in things that are really hard. How do we know what parts of that we really should take in and what parts of that we shouldn't, and how do we let that meet us where we are developmentally as well? And so that question pushed my thinking in ways that make me want to learn about that, think about that, write about that some more.
So that you're already modeling your own curiosity and sort of the next step. Um, this is a great, it's anonymous from the attendees. How do you do this work with toxic people? That's a great question.
Yeah. I would say there are people out there who are truly toxic, who are truly bad for us, who are truly, cancers in a culture of an organization. And when if you're stuck, if you feel really stuck in that situation, my best advice is to find a way out, exit that situation. Don't be trying to do that work. But I will say there's a lot of times when we all might experience someone as toxic or mad or bad or whatever else, when really what it is that we don't understand them well enough. And so I would start by going back to choosing curiosity, and saying, how can I first learn what's going on for this person? If they're doing something that has a bad impact on me, how can I get curious about their intent? How can I get curious about what they're up against? How can I get curious about how I might be playing into the very behavior that's affecting me back from that other person? And I'm not saying they're not toxic, because maybe they do fall into that toxic category. But I find when I do that, oftentimes there's something more going on. And there's something to learn. And when I learned that, one of my mentors, Diana Smith, calls that drilling for oil. Like when I drill deep enough, when I go deep enough about really what's going on for the person, where might that have come from, and what else is going on in the situation, you hit oil. And that oil is like you touch on their humanity in some way. And when I can get to what's really going on, oftentimes behavior that seems crazy or seems hurtful, um, there's some explanation. That doesn't excuse it. It doesn't mean we should tolerate it, but at least it can give us a toehold to understand it so that we can have a different kind of conversation, which can include letting them know the impact and what we need. But that would be the starting point.
Yeah. And I'll just say something very bluntly. Like I'm 56. I make choices of people I don't want to be around.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and I think that's also giving ourselves permission. It's probably harder in the work setting, but in your own personal lives, there are people that like they sort of, they're called vampires, right? For a reason. They suck the energy out of you, or
Yeah.
they just take and take, but they don't actually give back. But I think in those ways, context matters a ton, right?
Totally.
There's an
Totally.
application.
And there's nothing in the ask approach that says you always have to engage. It's a choice, and we even say choose curiosity. So you can choose it or you cannot choose it, but it is a choice that you have.
I want to share something. I'm going to just be very personal for a second, and I'm just going to share my. I went to the website. So this is why I want you to, for the you that are attending. If you just go to, will you share the website really fast, Jeff?
Yes, it's www.askapproach.com.
All right. And there's a quiz you can take. So I took the quiz getting prepped for this webinar. I'm just going to show you. So all the bars really should be to the right, but they're not. And my lowest score, I'm just going to be very honest. My lowest score was actually choosing curiosity. Like I was in the mid. There's a couple of questions on there that I knew that I was going to get a low score because I answered honestly. But it's a great opportunity for you to just take this quiz. You'll just get quick feedback. And there's lots of recommendations there. There's actually also there's a discussion guide there. So when you get your free copy of the book, you can go and get the discussion guide. I wanted to just share that. Jeff, I know we're sort of close to time. Is there anything that you would like, sort of like your last word before we sort of close out the night?
Well, first, just thank you. I love this conversation. Second, in the spirit of the quiz and the bars and how far they are to the right and all that kind of thing, I thank you for your openness and vulnerability in actually sharing that. But I would also say, like, this is in the spirit of growth mindset, like, this is a learning process for myself too. In many ways, I wrote the book I need to read. I'm more of a student of this than than an expert in this myself. And so I would encourage us all to be gentle with ourselves about this as a learning process and say if there's a bar that you could go further to the right, if there's a way that you didn't tap in or learn or ask the right question, that's interesting. That's fascinating. And this is just an opportunity for us to all kind of progress on our journeys. And that's really the spirit of that I offer the book in.
Oh, I'm so grateful that you took the time. I know we're competing against, like, I think games on television and all kinds of other
Yes.
Emmy awards, but I do want to say a couple things about the book. So you'll get a free copy if you fill out the survey that's going to come tomorrow. You'll get a free copy, and in it, you're also going to find out two things. One, the different folks and the scenarios that Jeff writes about, but you're also going to find out that Jeff's a great parent. And to me, I feel like that's something that it's just one of those nuggets. I'm like, oh, I wish I could be that good. But it's great. And I just am so grateful for you. We do have a little surprise for folks, the attendees here. So this is sort of a beginning launch of the book because it just got published. And what we're going to do in the fall is actually do a series based on the ask method. And so in the survey that you're going to get tomorrow, we're going to just ask a few questions about what would you want to see in the fall. And we're going to launch a series in the fall that Jeff's going to lead. And you'll have a copy of the book and maybe hopefully you'll tell your friends. We're also looking for a school district or a school with a leader that if you'd like to do a book study with your group. We were looking for close to 20 folks together, and we'll give you 20 sets of the book that will help you lead that conversation. We just want to get good feedback, dynamic feedback of what you think, and just make it interactive. But we're just so grateful that you took the time to join Jeff and Emily and me, and we hope that you enjoy the copy of the book. And now you can go back to your night.
Thank you so much. She looks like we already have a volunteer
Ah.
for the school. And I just really appreciate you inviting me. Love this conversation. Love the work of Pure Edge.
Oh, thank you so much. And we'll hopefully human connection, that's our big thing, right? We just happen to have to do it on Zoom. But thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Hopefully you'll go back out. If you're on the West Coast, go have dinner. If you're on the East, I don't know if you're going to grab a movie, but definitely fill out the survey tomorrow and we'll get you a copy of the book. Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Take
Jeff.
care. Thanks
Bye.
so much. Bye.